Welcome in here to a little late night or early morning. I don't know when you're watching here. Warchant TV. We've got some big news, so big that we had to come your way around 10:30 Eastern on August 1st. Vince Spicer joined by Ira Schoffel, and there's some interest, Ira, in ACC contracts that were released Thursday by the conference following a legal challenge from Florida's Attorney General. Heavily redacted, but there was one page in particular of interest. I think it took you about 164 pages or so to find, but there was something there that had something that FSU fans might like regarding deals with ESPN ending a little sooner than we would have thought initially. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, as you said, so Ashley Moody, Florida's Attorney General, had sued earlier this year to get access to these TV contracts between the ACC and ESPN. It's part of Florida State's lawsuit against the ACC, trying to get out of the conference and try to get into a richer conference at some point. But the ACC finally agreed that they were ordered, or they reached an agreement where they would turn over the documents, and they turned them over to the Attorney General, and the Attorney General basically put them on her website for the public to read. And as you said, most of it is redacted. All the facts and figures, the terms of different things, that basically they'll say that's all confidential business agreements that ESPN shouldn't have to put out there to the public. And that's fine. But there is a couple of interesting things in there. And the big thing is it seems to validate what Florida State said in their lawsuit. Because if you go back to before December, before Florida State filed their lawsuit, what we've all been reporting for the last 7-8 years is that in 2016, when the ESPN and the ACC signed their new contract in 2016, we all said it was through 2036. That's what ESPN said. That's what the ACC said. That's what everybody's been reporting. When FSU filed their lawsuit in December, they said, actually, now that we've been looking at these documents, and FSU and Clemson and other schools in the conference started looking through these TV agreements, they realized that actually the contract does not extend to 2036. What they said in their lawsuit is it actually extends it runs through 2027.
Wow.
And the ACC has the right to extend it to 2036. That's a big deal, because if that means they have a right to extend it to 2036, Florida State contends that the ESPN could cancel the contract in 2027. Wow. And in the parts of the contract that are not redacted, it basically backs up that contention. Now, the ACC has never admitted that. Jim Phillips, the commissioner of the ACC, when he's been asked about that topic, has kind of danced around it and basically made it sound like, there could be some renegotiations for the 2027 through 2036, but he's never acknowledged that the deal could be scrapped in 2027. And if it is, well, does that mean the grant of rights is scrapped in 2027? And if it is, does that mean Florida State and Clemson and these other schools could get out of the conference way earlier than we thought, and maybe way cheaper than we thought if it doesn't go through 2036? So part of that's redacted in what was released Thursday night. Some of the dates are redacted, but based on what Florida State had put in their lawsuit 6 months ago, 7-8 months ago now, it corresponds with the idea that in February of 2025, which is just in 6 months or so, the ESPN is going to have to decide whether or not they want to extend it past 2027 or not. And if they decide not to, then it seems feasible that the contract could end in 2027.
Wow, that's huge news. 2027 comes a lot faster than 2036, so that's exciting. And it seems like there's some real motion here in favor of Florida State. So what would that mean if there was? Does that mean changes is imminent sooner than expected? Where do you head from here?
Well, I think I think a big question a lot of people would have as you're hearing this is like, okay, why would ESPN do that? Like, would they really just cancel the deal in 2027 and let all these teams go free? And I don't think they would want to cancel the deal, but I think there is speculation and questions of talking to other people that cover the ACC, that in the media, and other people I've talked to around this story. There is speculation that maybe ESPN didn't love the fact that the ACC went out and brought in these 3 new schools. They went out and got Stanford, Cal, and SMU basically as a stopgap in case Florida State and Clemson left. The one clause in the ACC contract with ESPN that requires there's a clause in the contract that requires the ACC to have a certain number of teams for the contract to stay in existence. And the feeling is that the ACC added those schools because they were afraid that they might lose Florida State, Clemson, and maybe North Carolina. And so they needed to keep that number of schools at 15 to still be a viable conference and keep that contract. Well, part of that deal was ESPN has to pay those schools just as much as they're paying Florida State, Clemson, and everybody else. Like right now, it's around $40 million or so. Now that's an extra times 3. It's $120 million a year. ESPN's paying the ACC now because you added those schools. Well, ESPN may not be thrilled about that. Right. And they may feel like this contract now is a burden to them, and maybe they want to renegotiate it. And that's the big question. I don't think there's any chance that ESPN is going to say we want to walk away from the ACC in 2027. They still need games on TV. Like you could say that the ACC is not a great conference. Certainly, if Florida State and Clemson leave, it's not a great conference, but that's still a lot of football games. They have a lot of hours to fill on ESPN, ESPN2, ESPNU, and the ACC network, obviously. So they're going to want that inventory, but maybe ESPN comes back in February when this deal is the deadline to renegotiate. Maybe they come back and say, we want to start paying less per school, or we want to rework the deal. If that happens, the big question is, what does that do to the grant of rights? Does that mean ESPN has canceled their contract as of 2027, and then it's a new deal through 2036, or and that may be a legal matter. I don't know the specifics of that, but that's the kind of the feeling right now is with that deadline. If ESPN doesn't just want to rubber stamp it and extend this contract through 2036, then there's a possibility there could be an opportunity to leave and get out of the grant of rights as of 2027. And if that's the case, Florida State or any of those schools could pay $80 million for those 2 years or whatever it is to get out sooner. So this is a big deal. I mean, I really think this little part of the contract is a big deal. And the other part of it is if the ACC is concerned about whether or not the ESPN is going to extend the contract or not, maybe that maybe that might make them more willing to settle at some point. So again, there's nothing definitive in this. This isn't like, okay, this is clearly a silver bullet that Florida State's going to be able to get out. But Florida State has been saying that this could happen. The ACC hasn't confirmed it. These documents show that it really could be the case.
Feels like maybe the wheels are turning a little bit, Ira. We're getting things started here. We're revving up the ignition some. One thing that stood out to me in your article, and if you haven't read it, make sure you head over to warchant.com and dive a little deeper into this. But this is one excerpt from it that stood out to me. If the ACC's ESPN contract and grant of rights are deemed to be enforceable through 2036, Florida State and Clemson could each be required to pay more than $500 million to cover their exit fees and regain their television rights. Right. So obviously a significant amount of money. I mean, so there's greater things at stake here than just leaving the ACC when you kind of consider that.
Well, and that's really what it's all about is right now. And the premise that we've all been working under is if the grant of rights and the TV contract go through 2036, basically that $500 million is factoring out what it would cost in terms of the exit fees, which I think the exit fees are about $120 million, maybe $130 million.
Gotcha.
But then the additional $400 million would come off of, basically $35 to $40 million a year that ESPN is under contract to pay these ACC schools for the next decade plus to get to 2036. And so Florida State ostensibly would have to pay $570 million, Clemson as well, to get their rights back, to say, okay, we're going to pay you for our rights through 2036. We're going to pay you the exit fees. And if we had to pay the full price, we're going to pay all that. And now we can go join whatever conference we want to go to. If the contract were to end in 2027, that's 9 years sooner. That's $350 to $400 million less. So it would be a dramatic change. It would be it would be the difference between Florida State being stuck in the ACC maybe for a few more years, or maybe possibly being out of the ACC as soon as next year or 2026. And I think that's the goal. Like, Gene has reported on our site. I've been reporting on our site. The people that are the decision makers of Florida State want to be out of the ACC in the next year or two. That's the goal. We'll see how they do it, but this would be a huge deal if it looks like this is going to happen. That ESPN's going to want to restructure that deal because they don't like the new format of the ACC. Then it opens the door to leaving earlier, and if they can leave earlier, then they wouldn't owe the $500-600 million. So that's a huge part of it. Is the financial part of it is probably the biggest part of it.
Right. Absolutely. It looks like the path could be becoming clearer. Maybe we'll see as the developments continue. Make sure you head over to warchant.com for the latest. Stay tuned here on Warchant TV. I know we've got plenty of FSU practice content coming here on the channel, so make sure you like and subscribe on the way out. For Ira Schoffel, I'm Ben Spicer. Thanks for joining us here on Warchant TV.